Hello and welcome to the show Beyond the Journal, where we discuss social media, digital education, and current controversies in cancer and medicine. I'm Dr. Jack West, Associate Clinical Professor in Medical Oncology at the City of Hope Cancer Center in the Los Angeles area. And I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Charu Agarwal, Leslie M. Heisler, Associate Professor of Lung Cancer Excellence at the University of Pennsylvania's Abramson Cancer Center in Philadelphia. Hey, Charu.
Hi, Jack. And today we are pleased to welcome Dr. Chadi Nabhan, who is actually the host of another awesome podcast, Healthcare Unfiltered. He's a medical oncologist based in Chicago, who currently works at Caris Life Sciences and is the adjunct professor at the University of South Carolina. Welcome, Chadi, to Beyond the Journal.
Thank you. I'm very, very honored that you're asking me to be on.
We have a lot to talk about, but one thing that I really admire, and I think Charu as well, we were discussing that, you have been a pioneer in a lot of the social media platforms, trying new things, new podcasts, and I really also respect that you go beyond just cancer, getting into social issues, really mixing it up on COVID restrictions and social policy debates about pretty contentious topics. And Charu and I, when we were developing Beyond the Journal as a concept, we're trying to figure out its scope and go beyond. We're both thoracic oncologists, but we didn't want to be just talking about lung cancer data. We wanted to go beyond that. But how broad to go, how much to get into debates of social issues is a real question, and you take it out pretty far, the 20,000, 30,000 feet view with some pretty eclectic topics. So I'd like to just start with, what are your goals in terms of who you want to reach, what you want to do with your podcasts? Is there a big plan to that, or does it reflect your just varied eclectic interests?
Well, Jack, first of all, I think you're being very generous by calling me a pioneer. I think that's very, very nice of you to say, but I think I aspire to stay relevant, but I certainly don't consider myself a pioneer, but thank you for the compliment. When I decided to develop Healthcare Unfiltered, initially, as you recall, I had a different podcast, and you both have been generous by being my guests on the newer podcast, but I had the Outspoken Oncology podcast, and I was really more focused on oncology development, oncology issues, and I really felt that oncology represents a very small fraction of what happens in healthcare ecosystem, albeit very important and very critical, but still does not really reflect everything that happens outside of cancer care. So when I wanted to develop a podcast that I view it as more educational to the general public, to everybody that might be interested in healthcare, not just cancer patients or cancer doctors, but at the same time, I wanted to allow various points of view to be discussed on the podcast. I'm a firm believer that there are always two sides to every topic. And to every single issue that we deal with, whether it's social policy, whether it's drug development, whether it's a clinical trial, there's always two sides. And I really wanted to have a platform where I can work very hard to bring two different views to the same topic, so at least the listener can hopefully form an educated opinion about that particular topic. That was, so my reach is global. I would like to reach more people outside of oncology. And the goal is to provide a platform for various views on the same topic to hopefully be more educational. My podcast is not about me. It's not about my opinions. Every so often I cave and I do offer an opinion about a couple of things, every so often. But if you listen to it, it's actually very rare. I usually bring others to offer their opinions.
So, this Twitter can sometimes become an echo chamber, and it can really become sort of this place where you meet people that resonate your views. You've been a proponent of really welcoming debate. You have a new sort of bi-weekly chat on Clubhouse where it's called Agree to Disagree, if I'm not mistaken. You actually welcome debate in that. Have you faced any backlash with the process? And also, do sometimes your opinions tend to cloud the debate? Because all of us have opinions, right?
Yeah, no. I think, I'm a firm believer in really debates as long as they are civil and they're really, it's okay to have a discourse. We don't have to agree on everything, but we should still be able to have a cup of coffee and chat or have a meal as we are disagreeing. And I really felt over the past couple of years, things have shifted, especially on Met Twitter. And whether it is the politics of the country over the past year to 2 years, whether it is the pandemic, where everybody had such a strong opinion about something, I can't put my hands on it, but I certainly believe things have changed. And I didn't like the change in a way that there's always dissenting views into whatever topic that we are talking about, and it's either my way or the highway, if you will. In other words, there should never be an opinion where I'm 100% correct and you're 100% wrong. There should always be a gray area. And I felt that over the past year to 2 years on Twitter, when you see a lot of these debates, people get really animated and angry, and they block each other and they mute each other and they screenshot and they go back. It's like crazy. It was all over the place. And I really wanted people to agree that it's okay to have different opinions. And I oftentimes, honestly, I bring back a very, maybe silly, but it's a good example. I think if we did not have different opinions, we would have still believed the earth is flat. I mean, at some point, people believed the earth was flat, and then we discovered the earth is not flat. I don't think it's flat. But if we did not challenge the view, there are so many things in science, we had to challenge these views. But lately, the pandemic, because it was really polarizing. There's so many issues with the pandemic, and we can go into it in terms of some examples. But I think the pandemics and the politics infiltrated Met Twitter and Twitter to a degree where I hope it goes back to the same medium I enjoyed when I actually first joined in 2013. Do I get backlash? Sometimes when I offer opinions, people go back and forth, and I try to pick the battles on Twitter, especially. You have to choose. Honestly, you have to choose the battle. Which one is worth it? Which is not? Because people take it personal. I mean, you both are so active in academic medicine. How many times you go on the podium and you debate a topic and your colleague debates another one, and it's okay. Now, if you put in COVID-19, you put a couple of social issues like vaccinating kids, just throw an example, vaccinating kids 12 to 15 years old. I think it's okay to have a discussion about this. I think if I say that vaccinating kids may not be an emergency thing, that doesn't mean I'm an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I'm vaccinated. I vaccinated my children since they were born. But somehow, if you debate an issue, people will take it out of context. And, so it's been a challenging every so often. So I do get backlash, to answer your question, Sharu, sometimes. And I'll have to pick my battles and choose which ones are worth keep fighting, which ones I'm like, okay, I'll let it slide and I'll move on.
So would you say, though, that things have become kind of more partisan, that you're just cheering for your team or highlighting and polarizing things against, there's a sidedness even in medical oncologic debates that didn't exist? Or, does this reflect the direction of the country into a higher contrast, black, white, instead of shades of gray. Has the debate changed in med Twitter, or the medical community kind of reflecting the political climate in the U.S.?
I think in certain topics, yes, but not in all topics. I think, we can still debate the ADORA study and be okay, because it really has nothing to do with social policy, maybe about expensive drugs, possible, obviously. But I think, if you stick just to the science and clinical trials, people are able to tolerate that, right? I mean, we could debate lung cancer screening, mammograms. I think people will still be able to have that. I think the minute you start getting into certain topics that are considered public policy, it's an issue. And I think you have to choose which topics you are willing to really argue. The other thing that I'm challenged with, I don't like the debates on Twitter. I'm not good in 280 characters. I hate threads, honestly. I don't like threads. I mean, sometimes I read a thread up to 3 threads. If you go over 3, I'm done. I can't. I feel this is a good form. We could sit down and talk. I mean, it's impossible to debate over threads and Twitter and screenshots. I don't know how to do that. And that's why, to Charu's earlier point, I thought, Clubhouse was a reasonable platform. I can, we can have a debate, something, you can have a conversation, because it becomes so impersonal whenever you just use these 280 characters to debate something. And I could share with you that what has fascinated me sometimes when I see 2 people arguing on Twitter a lot, I actually reach out to both of them and say, I would love for you to both to come on and debate the topic. I mean, I'm not confrontational. I actually facilitate a discussion. And they don't want to. Like, it's pretty interesting. Sometimes they agree, and sometimes people say, no, I'm okay. And like, well, you just we're arguing on Twitter for like half an hour, offering you a platform where you could just have a conversation, a dialogue. And I think Twitter made some people comfortable, because you can just say whatever you say, and you don't have really to, it's easier to write something and move on.
Yeah, one of the things also is, with a platform like Clubhouse, if you're not there when it happens, you miss it, right? So it's sort of like with Twitter, at least you can come back to it, you can revisit it. And, Jack and I have talked about, will a platform like Clubhouse really succeed? And, with podcasts, you can go back and listen to it. I just feel like Clubhouse is so temporary. I've entered conversations 45 minutes into the hour, and I have no clue what people are talking about, so it's sort of like, yes, in a way, I think it's more demanding to argue or debate a topic on Clubhouse, but also in a way, there's no record of it, right? So what do you think the future of Clubhouse is, or things like Twitter Spaces, where, there's no record at the end? And
what would drive you to move a platform, something you're doing, onto Clubhouse? Because, I mean, personally, I just feel one of the things that bothered me about, I can have a great second opinion with the patient, but it helps only the person or people who are there, and then it evaporates into the room. And that's the ephemeral nature of Clubhouse is disappointing to me in a world where now one of the benefits to me of having so much be virtual is that you record it and it's available for anybody, anytime, which I think is kind of the direction that we want to be going, kind of in the world of information wants to be free. Information also wants to be available on demand in a way that you don't have to be there when it happened.
Yeah, I think they're not mutually exclusive. I think I do think actually there is a future to Clubhouse and to Twitter Space, and I'll tell you why I think that. So the Twitter Space and Twitter Spaces, whatever they're calling them, or Clubhouse, they have two advantages that podcasts don't have, which is the ability to engage listeners and participants in the conversation. So I think, let's say today we're taping this, and let's say there are others who are listening to our conversation. And then you open the floor for questions and answers, and they're able to be part of the discussion. That is a nice flavor because, listeners now, an audience and people who know you and know the other debater are maybe able to ask questions as if you're on a podium and you're debating the conversation, and then last 15 minutes Q&A and people can come to the microphone and ask you questions. That we can't do on a podcast unless you actually send the link, make it public, and then you really don't have, it can work. I've actually thought about it and I haven't been able to figure out how to execute it. The same thing applies to Twitter Space. And I'm actually okay, contrary to common belief, I'm okay that you don't have to tape it and it's not available, because it really makes you then think that the people who dialed into the conversation, actually they made an effort, they're really interested in it, they did not really have to tape it. So there's really an inherent interest in the topic. I recall that when you and Charu had a discussion on lung cancer for AACR on Clubhouse, I dialed in, I was very interested in it, so I put it on my calendar, because you just have to advertise for it a little bit in advance so people know, and I was very interested. So and it's very timely. People like to tape the conversation and then listen to it later. But I think it takes away from its mojo, if its flavor. So I think there's two different things. As if you're watching a TV show that you just cannot tape and you just have to mark your calendar and listen to it, versus you can DVR it or whatever platform now. Nobody DVRs. I think you can watch it on Netflix. But I think it's going to stay. I believe what's going to happen is, they're very, very similar. Clubhouse and Twitter Space as social media platform, very, very similar. People can participate. So in my mind, I wonder if Twitter is going to buy Clubhouse at some point. I don't know. But I haven't figured out how Clubhouse monetizes. Clearly, Twitter monetizes by so many ads all over the place. Clubhouse, I have not seen ads yet. So I'm trying to think at some point, it's all about economics, right?
Right. One of the other things we wanted to talk to you, Chadi, today about is your transition from academia to industry. Tell us about it, how it came about, and what were some of the decisions. I always feel like there's so many forces that can pull you to stay into academic medicine. Not all of us go into academic medicine to begin with anyway. So for those of us that do, there are very specific reasons that we wish to check off to sort of stay in academic medicine. But you sort of have, very early on adapted to, trying to do something new and moving into industry. So talk to us about that. And secondly, I would ask you, in today's day and age, do you think staying in academics is feasible, sustainable? Academia is not what it used to be 20 years ago. None of the trials are really being led by academicians. They are being led by industry. It's a very different scenario. Cooperative groups are not really doing the kind of trials they did 20 years ago. So, talk to us about this transition and also just sustainability.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll answer the second question first. I think that if we think about the importance of advancing science and patient care at the core of whatever we are trying to accomplish, no single sector could do this alone. Industry, the pharmaceutical industry and the manufacturer, they just simply cannot do it alone. Academic medicine cannot do it alone. Community oncology or community practices cannot do it alone, and so on. And I think it requires collective, collaborative effort amongst all sectors, with the hope that with this collaboration, we're able to make, advancement in science that we can all aspire that these advancements transcend to patient care and patients are going to do better. And I've always said, we are all, the three of us, as well as the entire world, either previous patients, current patients, or future patients. We all are, whether we like it or not. At some point, we're going to enter the healthcare system as patients. And some of us may have, some of us may have not, but the point is we will. And what we want is we want to be able to get hopefully the best care and have access to the best drugs that treat us. Now, and I think, sometimes there's always the, there's a finger pointing, well, this person has left and it's a loss for academia, and I view this as a gain for patient care, because if that person goes somewhere and is able to do something that helps patients benefited. So I think collaboration is going to be important for all sectors. In terms of my personal transition was, I felt that the continued academic route is very predictable. When you think about it, it's really very, very predictable. You just have to do the clinical trials, and you continue to publish, and you will be promoted unless you piss off people. And, which is, I think, if you play your cards right, there's a lot of policy in academia. You just hopefully should not, but it's kind of known. You have a trajectory in terms of instructor to assistant to associate to a full professor based on publications and so forth. And to your earlier point, I think sometimes academia and cooperative groups move a little bit too slow. I think adapting to innovation is not always, it takes time. There's so many layers to be able to sell an innovative idea, to advance it. I had a couple of opportunities to leave where I really felt I can help patients at a larger scale. Like when you are at a hospital or a practice, you're helping one patient at a time or a few patients at a time, which is great. I think it's very important. And nothing replaces taking care of that one patient and them telling you thank you and hugging you. But I do think when you step out and try to think broadly, you might be able to have an impact on populations and on patient care at large. And I felt that opportunity came to me, as I transitioned from the University of Chicago. So my goal, honestly, and that happened after I got my MBA, and I think getting the MBA made me understand economics more, healthcare more at a broader scale. I started thinking I could actually I could still help patients, but not necessarily from the stethoscope and the provider side. There are things I could do in the healthcare medium that I can actually help patients. And that's really why I transitioned. I think they're completely two different. The challenges are different, but the intersection should be, how can we work together? That's my philosophy always.
I think it may just be 'twas ever thus, but I believe Charu and I, seen some very talented academicians go into industry positions in the very recent past, and wonder if there's a challenging brain drain. And you mentioned the need for balance, and so I wondered, do you think there's any real danger of that balance tipping and it becoming too top heavy with pharma really controlling things to the, just tipping that balance away from a symbiotic association partnership? Or is this something that's often, with our politics, often a pendulum swing, and there's going to be a correction because nature hates a vacuum, and there's going to be more good opportunities in academics? So I just obviously the world has changed. We have far fewer academic run trials, more pharma run trials. Is there a danger of this polarizing too much in one direction, or do you think it's always going to course correct?
Yeah, so I don't have the stats, Jack, to know obviously percent of academicians that left. So it's hard. I don't know whether it is, let's say, in 2020 is higher than 2010. Honestly, I don't know that, but maybe. I think sometimes we just tend to know more people at a given year that left academia, so we may assume that this is really happening. But I don't know the stats. I'm sure we can find it somewhere. But I do think you bring up a good point about the balance, and I think that I think that academic physicians and physicians who are taking care of patients should always have a voice at the table when the trials are being thought of, as well as really being rolled out. And I think patient advocacy should have a role in that. And what I have learned is that if there are reasons to, again, if let's say the thoracic community says this trial is just simply wrong, there has like methodology flaws, and we really don't think this is a trial that we should conduct, I do think industry does listen and try to understand what the issues are. Not all the time, but certainly we need to work collectively to make sure that we have to always to bring it back. It's about patients, right? It's about patient care. So I can't really tell whether there's significant imbalance that we need to correct. I think that every year you are going to see some people who, leave for various reasons. I mean, personally, I just think that I wanted to challenge myself. I mean, I think that I can help patients differently, right. But at the same time, I can learn something different. Like I could learn, I could just learn more different skill set. I can probably understand the different structure outside of academia, and I could really expand my network and meet other people who probably are way smarter than I am and learn from them. I don't know where the balance is going. I don't know. I'm curious. Do you think that the pendulum is really swinging towards one direction versus another?
It just certainly seems that way, and maybe it's just a wave, and it'll, like Jack said, maybe it'll course correct, and it won't be like this. But I don't know, Jack, does it feel like that to you too?
Well, I think Chadi brings a fair point. How much of this is just the familiarity bias of like the last, we might have felt this way in 2011 as well. About, oh my God, think of all the people who we loved and lost to industry. Not to guilt anybody, because I think it's a good decision for many, and it's not wrong, and it's a different way of serving the oncology community, no question. Arguably a bigger one now as pharma trials become an ever more outsized. Have an outsized role in shaping the direction of things more than, we just don't have the big scale cooperative group trials being done like they were in the 90s or.
Yeah, Jack, we need to ask ourselves why that is, right? I mean, I think ultimately what happened that cooperative groups became a little bit slower and inefficient. And I think you and I and Sharu have sat in these, cooperative groups meetings, and goodness, it takes 5 years to sometimes agree to a concept to start that trial. So some of this is the fault of the inefficiency and the bureaucracy, as well as the politics of cooperative groups and who's running this, who's the PI, who's going to end up being the author, because this is really a big deal. I mean, there are people who will not participate in a clinical trial unless they are the lead and they will get the authorship and so forth. There's a lot of that happens, as you know, beyond the walls of academic.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think that maybe part of this is the vote with your feet. If it's not a bad thing for people to look at the opportunities beyond the opportunities only at their institution or necessarily within academia. I mean, if you, because of whatever oncopolitics issues there are, and yes, the cooperative group system has historically been pretty sclerotic in its processes. It's the antithesis of nimble. And I think that's a real issue, and it can be closed. And so I think people may look at that and say, I'm not getting the opportunities I need to advance. And their better opportunities may well be appropriately to look outside.
But I just think we need to. Yeah,
some of this is also based on the metrics for promotion in academic medicine, right? So the incentives are sometimes misplaced. I think, maybe this should be a call to academic institutions to really revise the standards. If really the goal is to advance science, help patients, improve patient care, the metrics for promotion maybe should not be how many first author publications you have, but perhaps look at it differently in terms of team science and collaboration. I think that's really the way to move this forward, because otherwise the incentives are always going to be driven by what is being dictated by a particular academic institution. And I think sometimes those are just misplaced.
But I think we should really migrate away from the term that we've lost this individual to industry.
Sure.
I really think that it adds into the divide between academia and industry. And I think there's, having a thoughtful academician who has taken care of patients, being part of, let's say, a clinical trial development group at a particular company that has novel drugs, wherever it is, I think it's a game for patients. This person is going to bring in a lot of patient perspective. And I think people really, there's an inherent suggestion that what happens in industry is all about profit and economics. And I think obviously this is extremely an important part of any company, including any academic institution. I mean, every academic institution, believe me, they look at the balance sheet and they look at how much money they're getting, how much money they're spending, and how can they really increase the profit as well. It doesn't mean they don't want to take care of patients. So I think there are ways to make sure we bridge the divide. And I believe that having good academicians who are patient-centric and care about patients as part of industry is going to help patients. And I think, industry has money, has a lot of financial power, and that's why, they're able to sponsor trials and they're able to take that done. And academic institutions don't have the financial backing always to run these trials on their own. So some form of collaboration will always be needed. We just have to make sure that in that collaborative effort, patient voice is not lost. That is the most important piece.
I think it's a really good point to not have the mindset of so-and-so's lost to industry. That's really valuable. That it shouldn't be us or them. It shouldn't be rooting for any side kind of thing. I think a current question, and maybe particularly relevant when we're on podcast, you have a podcast. Do you think that social media and online activities should factor into potential advancement, or is that still something that's more in the province of conventional publications and the historical standards of promotions committees?
I actually do have an opinion about that, and now you made me think I need to probably do a podcast on this to have debate both sides. Yeah. I don't think so. I don't believe that. It's very difficult to police because there are many people out there that they are starving for likes and retweets and their tweet to go viral and all of these things, and they're willing to say anything to get that done. So then I will say, well, if Dr. Nabhan has 5 tweets with more than 5,000 likes each, then he fulfills this box of the criteria. It's very difficult to police. And I think the social media, does not, it should not really add into academic promotion. Having said that, I think what could add into academic promotion is being innovative and create social media platforms that add into the education. So let's say, for example, you and Charu develop a social media platform that helps educating patients. And I know, Jack, you're very passionate about that. You've been doing this for a long time, but that's different, right? This is not about what's your Twitter feed. This is you were innovative and you created a social media platform that helped education and so forth. And these could go under extracurricular activities and all of that. But it's hard for me to believe that my Twitter activity, half the time I'm talking about baklava, is going to really feed into this. I mean, if somebody has 50,000 followers, is this person more influential than somebody who has 10,000? At the surface, yes. But does this mean the messages of that 50,000 follower individual are more accurate? I mean, is there a peer review to the process? It Yeah, I think my opinion is clear on this, but I do see the other voice, and I wonder maybe I should really think about having a debate on it.
I think this is the future of medicine, right? Though, especially I think the pandemic has taught us that, platforms like Twitter and perhaps Clubhouse have been so valuable in terms of exchanging ideas, really debating topics, also following meetings. I think there has to be some value placed into determining what may be the social media, what may be the metrics to determine social media activity, because it takes time. I think it takes effort. And after all, I think if you're in an academic institution or at an academic institution, your Twitter presence goes to, either promote or, amplify that particular institution as well. And I think, most of the traditional metrics have to do with elevating the field, adding something new. And I think in some ways, a lot of discussions on Twitter can also do that. So I agree with you, Chadi. I don't think it should be as simple as the number of likes or retweets or just the number of followers, but perhaps there should be metrics in terms of, is this individual, just by virtue of being on social media, really elevating the field or making a difference that changes the field vertically?
But you may risk taking away the independent voice of the individual, because once the institution now has a say into what you're saying, I mean, oftentimes what you say is the tweets are my own opinion. They're not really the institution's opinion, because I may have very different views than the institution. Once now it becomes interlinked, there will be some control into the content, right? I mean, I think it's a little bit, it's not as simple, I think, when you think about it. If I'm going to promote you, let's say, to a full professor based on your social media activity, I will need to have some control over that. I don't know if I'm going to be you may actually say something that you disagree with the dean on, or the dean doesn't agree with you. You may say, I don't think the EUA for kids between 12 and 15 is the proper regulatory authorities. Pisses everyone off at UPenn. Should you really be penalized that your promotion may be withheld? Because so we have to be just very careful, I think, because there's a gray area once you start adding additional layers to the activity that might affect your professional career.
I think there's some truth to that, but I just raise this because I think the way that traditional metrics are being used are not going to be sustainable in the next 20 years. I think so much of our education is going to be digital. It's going to be virtual. The pandemic has certainly, stretched our comfort level with traditionality. I don't think we will foresee a future where all meetings will always be 100% in person. And I think people and individuals will have to develop some sort of virtual presence. And how will individuals be assessed, academically, I think remains to be answered.
But at the same time, I think the people who develop a big online presence, take Michelle Giawali, who really came onto the scene mostly for putting ideas out there online, became known, coming from a training path that was not a trajectory to international visibility. But he did that. He became known enough through getting his ideas out there that the publications followed. And so at this point, he has published widely in a lot of very highly regarded journals, but it may have started through getting a foot in the door on social media. I think it's not that likely that you're going to become well-known on social media without having the opportunities to speak and write that follow. I think that, and so I think that I'm not sure how I feel about the promotions question, except that if you're that good on social media, you will have opportunities made available to you in ways that are conventionally appreciated or recognized.
I do think it's an opportunity to look at the entire promotion system in academic institutions. It is very heavy on publications and first authorship, very, 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 very heavy. And, I have known, and I know many folks who are so well published that I would never want to have my parent see, because they lack that touch, that clinical touch, the bedside manners, and the ability to understand. I think sometimes you need to have both, best of both worlds. And I feel that part of the academic promotions are very, very heavy on the publish or perish, right? That we always say that it remains true in 2021.
What about telemedicine? I'm doing more in telemedicine. The pandemic forced the issue, and just about everybody in March and April and May of 2020 had a crash course in it without it being necessarily optimized, but implemented whatever was available out of necessity. And we found that the world did not stop turning on its axis. It was possible to do a lot of this stuff, that many of the practical issues that held us back, the interstate licensing, et cetera, could be at least temporarily alleviated in a way that I would say gave us a sense that we could use this as a tool, but at the same time, it was not the right tool for all occasions. And I'm interested in your thoughts, Chadi, as somebody who's been in oncology a long time, who's looking at it from a broad perspective. What do you see long term as a role for telemedicine in oncology, given its potential limitations, but also the benefits of it?
Yeah, very good question. Thanks for asking it. I think it's here to stay, similar to what Charu was saying, that, most meetings are going to have a virtual platform as well as an in-person presence. I tend to believe that every ASCO, you will be able to do it virtual as well as in person. So we'll probably have half attendance at ASCO moving forward. But yes, I think telemedicine is here to stay. I do think it's going to help a lot of patients who struggle with transportations, with parking, who may not really need to see you and in person. What I feel strongly about is that decision has to be made by physicians as to which patients I'm going to see by Zoom or by whatever platform versus which patients I need to see in person. What I'm scared about, and I've written about the topic, is that this decision is taken away from the physicians and the treaters and is put in the hand of administrators who do not treat patients, and they just look at the Excel sheets and they start realizing, okay, well, this will really help our balance sheet, will help us, will profit more if Jack sees all of his clinic on Tuesday telehealth, and then we can get him to see 10 new patients on Wednesday. That's going to add more to the system. So I think we have to be very careful and continue to have the control as the physicians and the treaters in determining which of our patients do not need to come in and see us. And I would envision that you let's say you see me today in my clinic, and based on your assessment as my doctor, you will say the next return in 2 months, and you could put telehealth for 2 months. So then the next time I'm seeing you, I'll just log in and we'll see each other by screen. And then the one after, you bring me in. So you have to make that decision. I'm very nervous about that decision being made by administrators who have no idea how to take care of patients. Very nervous.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Chadi. We are so thankful to you for coming on our show. So thank you for joining us. You can find us on iTunes or wherever you find your podcast content. We hope that you will subscribe and send us comments and feedback to Beyond the Journal show gmail.com. We thank Mark Lindsay and Talking Speaker for production and distribution support. See you in a couple of weeks with our next guest. Thank you.
I'm a subscriber. Subscribe.
Excellent.
Thank you.